There we are. You see recording on your side?
I do, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ebony S. Bailey. I am here with another speaker chat. I have Pastor James Sam here to come and talk about. Listen, y'all have been trying to figure out what this session is about. And we're going to dive into this perspective. But first, you may be here just because you know who he is and you have no idea who I am. So my name is Ebony S. Bailey. I am an author strategist. I am a purpose enthusiast who challenges women to wake up and walk in their God-given purpose on purpose. God has challenged me over the last 2 years to be very intentional with every single thing that I do, because I am always producing. My words are going to produce what I say. My steps are going to produce what I don't do is going to show up. So I have been very intentional about the seeds that I'm planting with my words and my actions. And last year, the Lord commissioned me to plant this conference. And I was like, Lord, what in the world do you want me to do with all of these pieces? And he said, Ebony, create what you need and what you needed. And that's where the conference came from. It was out of a space of things that I needed that I couldn't find around me. All in one place. Like I had to go here for that, here for this. And he said, bring it together and create what you need, because other people need the same thing. And this year we're going a step further. But before we dive into that, can you introduce yourself to our audience today?
Most certainly will. Hey, everybody, my name is Pastor James Sam. I'm the pastor of J Sam Ministries here located in the city of Garner, North Carolina. What else am I? I'm a business owner. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a spiritual father to many. I'm also a servant of the Lord, just a quick synopsis of who I am. And I believe that we're in a time of where relationships are the new currency. I believe that it's a time where we really got to connect and build community. And so looking forward to this conversation and spending some time with you guys today.
Yeah. Community is so important because you can do so much more together than you can on your own. And I was that person that had to do everything. Like, I've been in therapy since last year, and I told her, I said, child, I got control issues. I said, my hands, I was like, my hands need to touch it. And she's like, but why? There has to be a reason why. And so learning to unpack, Ebony, let go. Why don't you feel safe? Why don't you feel like some people can carry what you are doing or what the Lord is telling you to do? And that's one of the things that I'm noticing this year. I'm a lot more free because I'm understanding that, yes, if God has given you a vision, he's also sent provision. And it's not always financial. It's people that come alongside the vision and help you carry that thing.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly. I think that you hit a note right there. Sometimes we live our lives on the defense, and for me, I feel like I'm in my life where the Lord is saying, listen, oh Lord, I'm God. I'm Alpha, I'm Omega, I'm it all, I'm sovereign, and you at some point you have to start to live your life in the liberty and in the freedom that he has allotted for us, so no, I'm no longer living in defense. I'm living, like they say, I'm living my best life, and that's what it's about. But that comes with maturity, that comes with time, and that comes with getting to a place in your walk, in your trust, in your faith in God, to say, hold on, I'm getting ready to let go of these crutches. I'm going to let go of this whatever it is that we're using to bring us stability, in all actuality. God is our stability. He's the one that gives that steady gait. So it's time to let go and let God, and that there is no path, there's no direction that you go down that he's not there. He'll meet you where you are. And so trusting him that you know, that, and I think one thing that's important is to understand that some of our things that we've experienced, our past, it's a place of reference, but it's not a place of residence. We have to go on. We got to move on from that place. Been there, done that.
Mm.
I look at where God has brought me from, but God is moving, and we got to move along with Him.
Yeah, he moves. And when he moves, and like last year, one of my sayings was, I'm going to pivot without a tantrum. Because I said, after I have my tantrum, guess what? The
Yeah,
problem is still there.
yeah,
Whatever I have not done. And do I really trust God if I'm gonna have a whole tantrum and he
hmm,
says shift and do that? What am I missing in that space? Like, I'm missing something. And I said, okay, God, this is my trust fall. And that's what I called all last year. This was
yeah,
my trust fall year. Like, not looking back there to make sure you really back there that you're gonna catch me, but no, literally falling into his arms and watching him sustain things that I didn't even think that I didn't think that were mattered in one way. Or I thought that, well, maybe he would take other people through that.
yeah.
Maybe I'm meant to stay in this space. And I
Hmm.
was like, maybe this is my thorn in my flesh that I'm gonna keep,
Right.
and it's gonna keep me before the Lord. And I had to realize, Ebony, no, that's your scapegoat. You're acting like that is it, but no, you're not trusting God to actually deliver you out of certain situations and certain things. And so even in this space where I am this year, still trust falling,
Yeah,
still still doing it. And I'm learning to not have that tantrum because it does not change anything. And then I'm like, Lord, now I got to learn this. I have to go around this mountain again because you're going to take me here and learn. Okay, you said, come, Peter, and I step out of the water onto the water. And I do that with the confidence, knowing that you're going to be with me. And that's what I'm doing in this season. Like, it's scary some days.
it is.
Oh my gosh, it is scary some days. And when you feel like you are a solopreneur, you're like, what do I
I like.
do? I don't have nobody beside me to do this with, but God's like, I sent people along, let them help you.
Right.
There are people sent to help you build the work. Let them help you.
That is phenomenal, Ebony, because I think sometimes we try to do it all ourselves, and that's when it becomes hard. That's when it becomes a burden, And God, like you said, God puts people in our lives strategically, not only who are who will carry, but they'll run with the, you know.
Ooh.
That so whether if it's finances, whether if it's just a boots on the ground, whatever it is, someone in your space to speak an encouraging word, that may be all you need. You might have the finances and everything is in order, but I need someone to give me that push, that nudge, especially when
Mm,
God is calling you to do something greater. There's a greater work, kind of like Nehemiah. When you think about Nehemiah building the wall, he
mm,
didn't have masons. He incorporated people that you would never think that were part of the plan. And so,
ooh,
he's calling, I need the musician, I need the doctor, I need this. All of these people played a strategic plan in the build. And so we can't look at where we are or who's around us as an indication of whether God is there or God's not there, right? Because God can move in the people that sometimes we very well overlook. You know what I'm saying? That could be
mm.
the missing piece and the missing key. And so, you know, um, there's no, thank you, Holy Ghost, and I believe this, that, sometimes we try to do it in a safe way,
Whew.
right? We try to do it in a safe way. I want to do it in a way where there's no injury or where there's no,
Mm,
no abrasion, But God says, hold on, but if you trust me like you say you do, right?
mhm.
Then you have to let go. You have to release and just trust that wherever road or whatever path that I take you down, that you go down, while you're trusting me, all your needs will be met. You won't lack. You won't have any needs. and I will be a provider. God did not give you a vision without provision. It's going to be there, right? And so we look forward to that. We have to look forward to that. So let's take the guardrails off and go for it, because God is going to be there.
He is. Oh my gosh, you said so much. I came to, so let me tell y'all how we got here. I went and I spoke at an event that Lady Sam had and your wife had. And this man gets up and he starts talking at the end. And
Mhm.
I was like, it's him. That's him. I heard him speaking and I heard how I just heard the God in your voice, and the words that you said landed. And I said, okay, he has to come speak to these women as She Woke Up.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a women's conference. I get it. But there's a space where you were so confident in a room full of women and you got up and you spoke to where you were and where your wife was. And I said, that's what people are missing. Some people don't understand that as a married, like they're married. So, and they are from New York and all of the things, right? So, um, I'm listening to the stories and it's giving me flashbacks to my childhood and my family and all of the things. But I listened to how you sat, you were sitting in the back and you were watching. It was almost as if you were covering the room from the back.
Yeah.
Anything that tried to get in, you were protecting the space, but you were also there to support your wife.
Yeah.
And some people don't realize that when with two individuals that are coming together, each person has a call and each person has a thing that God has called them to do in the earth.
Yes.
And sometimes people fail to realize that you both can move at the same time. You
Absolutely.
both can be called at the same time.
Ebony, I found out something some time ago, that when me and my wife got together, we had no indication, no clue that ministry was going to be the angle of the road that we were going on. All right, 30 years later, here we are, right? But I found out something, that when we work in unison, when we work together, the plan moves so much smoother. Not only,
Hmm.
I found out that for me, my talking about my thing, right? That I have, and I say this, I found out that my wife is my assignment.
Hmm.
She is there. God strategically placed her in my life for a reason. And I believe the same thing, vice versa. I believe that God placed us. And even though we come into our marriage early on, we had issues, we had problems, everyone does, right?
Yeah.
But when we realize that my problem and some of the issues that we were dealing with was the fact that I was not willing to yield to some of the things that God was calling her to. And she was not willing to yield to some of the things that God was calling me to. But when we came to understand that, hold on, we are fitly joined together.
Hmm.
Let's work together. Let's all right, let me see what I can do to help you get to where you are. Right. And as I started to assist, sometimes, it doesn't take all that. Sometimes it's just sitting on the bed and saying, all right, what you got going on? What can I do? Sometimes just conversation alone is a
Hmm.
great help. I realized that as I started to function and release myself into her space to be used for whatever it is that she needed to bring her into her own, that God started to move my stuff. And I said, hold
Wow.
on, wait a minute. There's something here, right? And I started to realize that, hold on, we work together. Our ministries are developing in a joint effort, right?
Yeah.
As we are realizing and understanding that, hold on, this is a joint effort. I know everybody's thing is different. But I realized that when it comes to us, that when we work together, we're like the dynamic duo, that we're like Batman and Robin. There's nothing that we can't do, and there's nothing that we can't overcome when we're riding together. And so, the She Wolf. I mean, it's going to be phenomenal. There's no question about that. But some of the difficulties that we deal with in relationships is just, you don't take it doesn't take anything from you as a
Mm.
man. It doesn't take anything from you to say, all right, let me go ahead and do what needs to be done. And we submit to each other.
Hmm.
I'm saying too
And
much.
some people don't understand that part because it is a when you married, it's some people have these gender roles and
Yeah,
they feel like you only stay in this lane. The husband is supposed to do this, the wife is supposed to do that. And then when you cross lanes, something's okay, alarms going off.
yeah,
But I find that because I've been married for 16 years. And when we find what works best for our union, like if I'm better with the finances, then Ebony handles the finances. If he's better with this, he handles it. So we understand our roles in that way. And we had to get on the same page to not allow the outside noise to come in and try to dictate how our life moved,
yeah,
because it's not what other people looks like. Like I think about Noah building the ark and how it was crazy to everybody else. Why are you doing that? What are you building
right,
an ark for? It's
right,
not raining. It
yeah,
had Why is it so big? Like I said, he built the first cruise ship and
yeah,
everybody wanted to get on it when the water came.
yeah,
But until it didn't make sense. And so one of the things that I had to understand is, and I pushed my husband in this way because he's not as much of a talker as I am.
mhm,
So I'm like, we have to be on the same page so that when we move and other people don't understand our moves, we have already gotten the plan so tightly knit together that it doesn't matter what anybody on the outside says, because we're good and God is good with what we all have come together to build. And it doesn't have to make sense to the outside. So I said all of that, and it comes right back full circle into your world, because when I was standing there, I heard you talk about even some of the women in your congregation
mhm,
that you were pulling on because you saw gifts on the inside of them and you wanted to help develop those things. I was like, that is maturity.
yeah.
That
I
is
believe,
maturity.
yeah, wholeheartedly. I'm learning something about myself. We grow in cycles, and um, I believe that as a pastor, that one of my mandates is to help develop
Mhm.
lead, develop people. And I believe that sometimes in our congregations or in our spaces or our spheres of influence, there are people that have tremendous gifts and tremendous abilities that just sit there, and
Mhm.
for me, that it's my job and my duty to try to bring those things to a forefront. And sometimes it's not an easy thing, it's not an easy task. And as a leader, you see things in people, and God gives you this sense of insight about certain people that they themselves do not see or may slightly recognize, but they don't want to deal with the uncomfortability, right, of going into that particular space. And so my job is to make you uncomfortable. My job is to put you in that space and make you work the work. And then you realize, as I said before, you'll look back and say, man, I've come a mighty long way. And that's what it's all about when it comes to those connections, those communities that we're a part of. We share space with people, and we have to understand that the space that we share with that individual, whether it's your wife, your husband, your children, or whatever it is, that there's a reason why God put us in those spaces, and are we activating the gifts in those people? Are we, effectively moving, and so that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do with my people, here at JSAM, no one gets a free pass. No one gets a free pass. And as the gifts develop, we start to see the greater picture, and you never know what it's like until that thing starts to happen. We could look at, and sometimes our development comes out of hardship.
Oof.
Comes out of hardship. Who would have thought that, in the case of Jonah, for instance, that Jonah was running from the call. You know, Jonah's running from the call, and sometimes we run from it. And God is saying, hold on, no, you got to understand that this thing is going to open up major doors for you. This
Mm.
your gift, the thing that you're running from, is the thing that's going to open the door. And so we stand at the door and we say, well, God, when you're going to move? God said, I packed you right. I put everything to make all things possible. So that's what it's about this season. Let's move and make things happen.
It is, and it's literally pushing on, do you really trust the
Mm,
Lord? Like, if he is giving you a work to do and it doesn't look like what you thought, do you
yeah,
still trust to continue to go forward? Like, my favorite, and I'm releasing a book at the conference,
yeah.
and it's in the world of Joshua, and I'm watching how when they got to the Jordan, the waters didn't stop. It did not stop until they took their first step in.
Mhm.
And I'm like, Lord, there are going to be so many situations where it doesn't look like this is the worst time for you to call me. This is the absolute worst time for you to ask me to do something. And he's like, but do you trust me?
Yeah,
Do you trust me? Has there been times that you've had to speak life into your wife, knowing that God is calling her to go forward and to move into new spaces, that she's like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And you're like, but I see it. I see it. And I want to put, and you want to thrust her forward because you know the call, because God spoke to you even about the things that she would be doing. Has there been moments that you had to push her forward, even in her uncomfortableness?
absolutely. There were many moments where I had to, sometimes you don't want to encroach on someone else's thing, right? You don't want to, but then you sit back and say, hold on, I have to say something. I have to
Mhm.
then, and really give that nudge to let her know, in various instances that where you are is not where I can't let you settle here, right?
Ooh.
Can't let you settle here because there is so much greater. You know, I think one thing in our walk in Christendom that's very difficult is sometimes we got to understand that in various instances, some of the people, even your spouse, may occupy a greater space of anointing.
Mm.
You see, can we be real today?
Be walk heavy, be real.
I think that when it comes to um, Christendom and some of the things that have been embedded in us, we feel that sometimes there's always a particular person that takes the lead, right?
Mm.
And I'm realizing that no, 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 that may not be the case. God will anoint who he so feels that he wants to anoint, right? So let's say, for instance, if my wife is anointed to spearhead a certain thing and I'm not, then I have to learn that, hold on, let me fall back, right?
Hmm.
Because the door that I'm trying to the door I want open, someone else may have to open that door for me.
My God.
You see, I'll
Mm.
use the scripture. The Bible says that Jesus, John, and Peter were all sitting at the table. Peter, who eventually is declared to be the rock, or the, the runner for the church, Peter has to fall back and pass the ball to John. The Bible says that John was laying on the bosom of Jesus. He was laying on the chest of Jesus. And Peter realizes at that point, I'm not the one in position. John, you are. And because
Mm,
you are in position, I yield because of the position that you hold. Sometimes we hold up our breakthroughs, we hold up our next, we hold up our new season because we're not willing to relinquish to someone else who is mandated to operate and function in that space. So Peter had to yield and say, John, you're in position right now. And because I yield to you doesn't make me any less. It,
right.
it shows that I'm mature enough to say, you're the one right now. So when it comes to my wife, I understand there are certain things that she's going to spearhead in this ministry. I'm the pastor. There's no question about it. It doesn't take nothing from me to say,
Right.
babe, you're going to run this. And I have no problem with that because that's what you're anointed to do. Right. And so, and I think a lot of relationships, the trouble that a lot of relationships deal with are the fact that we feel that the only person that can do this is this person. When we
Mm,
yield, when we yield and say, hold on, I'm gonna let you do it, then we start to see movement. We start to see movement. And so, and that's all together, and I yield back to you, Miss
ooh,
70.
no, that was good because you also have to understand the times and the seasons that you're in. You got to know that, and there will be times that that the Lord is like, okay, you need to allow. And I've had to learn this. There were times that I knew the space that our family was in. I knew what was going on in the household. We knew, but the Lord said, "Be quiet
Mhm.
and allow your husband to lead
Yeah.
because you have a control issue. I need you to allow him to lead. Can you do things? My father raised some strong women.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we know how to do everything. When I tell you I got all my own tools, like I got saws and drill power drills and all like okay. I asked you too many times to hang something up. You might come see me on the ladder, putting it up
Wow.
with my drill. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I had to learn, Ebony, stop, because there are some things that you, even in your marriage, you are creating an issue because
Mm.
you are trying to take control.
Oh God.
And there are things that you're not even allowing him to learn how to lead you because you're a different type of woman. So you're not even letting him learn how to lead you or how allowing the Lord to teach him how to lead me because I won't even give him the opportunity. And if I trust that God is really ordering our steps, then he already knew where we are. He already knew the things that we were going to experience, and he's going to cover and sustain us in that. And so even in the development of ministry gifts and all of that stuff, I stayed on the back end of that.
Yeah.
My husband was ordained as a pastor first. I heard God say clearly, I was in a service at the river,
Mhm.
and I heard God say, your husband will go first. And I said, okay. And so he went first. He went first with a lot of things, business, all of the things, and you are there to support. And it wasn't until I started to get this desire to do more things, he was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And he's like, what do you need? And I'm like, I don't know what I need. And we got to this year, last year conference, he did all my branding, graphics, website, all of that stuff, because that's, he does that effortlessly. And this year we were building, and I said, okay, I need to build 2026. So I started sending out invitations and all of the things. And then there was one person I had on my wall, and I was like, oh my gosh, they said yes. Like I was in the kitchen cooking. And I got an email come through and I let out a scream. And he was like, "What? What's wrong?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"She said yes." And
Hmm.
he looked at me and he said, "You are really building something."
Hmm.
And when I say it made all my insides just
Yeah.
like melted.
Yeah.
He was like, "You are really building something. Like, I'm proud of you." And to hear that and to know it came from a sincere place, I said there are some people that probably battle with that in their relationships because their spouse is not happy for the moves. They're
Mm.
not happy to see the elevation. They're not happy to see some of the things that you talk about actually come to pass. They're
Yeah.
not happy for that. And so I'm grateful that I do have that side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is phenomenal, and that's true. At certain points, roles reverse. My wife was saved before I was. I was still in the world, and because she gave her life to Christ, her perspective was a lot different than mine, right? And and I was very irresponsible prior to coming to Christ. I was, when you're in the world, you do as the world do, and the world like to do what it does, and you could fill in the blank, right? And so, because of my irresponsibility, she ran everything. She was in control of the money. She was in control of a lot of things because, I was doing me. But when I came into Christ, right? When I came into Christ and I surrendered and I gave my life to the Lord, and and I was getting my legs more or less, getting my stability in Christ. And as I started getting more stable and getting to where God wanted of me, she started to release that
Mhm,
control that to me, because even though I was the husband, I was not functioning as the head.
mhm,
And she had to step in. But when I started to walk in where God had designed for me to walk in, she began to release that role and guide me. That's a beautiful thing when you have someone that is not going to judge you because of your inconsistencies or because of your faults or your mishaps, and I wasn't put all together. I wasn't. And I think one key thing that in a relationship is that you have to have patience with the person that you're in connection and union with.
yeah,
That it takes time for everyone to develop, and
mhm,
I take my hat off to the women because women are so much mature than men. That's just my take on it, you know. And so it took me a little while for me to catch up. But when I caught up, you know, she relinquished and said, "All right, well, you run and I'll assist." Because I understand that there's going to be times that we're both going to mess up. And she was in her transition, I was in my transition, but together we came to an understanding that I need you just as much as you need
yeah,
me. Us work together, and we started to work together, and we started to build something. And so, you have to remain encouraged, and yeah, it's a good thing when you have that person that has your back, you know, and you have to root for that person. You have to undergird the your wife or your husband. You have to undergird them because they may not say it. They may not audibly say, "I need your help." Right?
mhm,
Times as men, we're not gonna say, "I need your help," right? But as women, you guys are very good at what you do. You'll come and assist without assisting. You know what I'm saying? And that's a
mhm,
wonderful, because as men, sometimes we got egos. We got egos, and but I think one thing that's important is for us to, as men, is to bring down some of those walls. It's a hard thing to bring down those walls, and it takes time to relinquish and say, "Lord, I'm no longer in control." And it takes time, but that's what relationship building is about. It's
yeah,
about getting into, as I said before, we go in cycles, and We have to learn the lesson in that season, or let that season come back around and we're on repeat.
Right.
On repeat. We don't
I ain't
been
got
there.
time. Yeah, this is such a good conversation because sometimes, and I love the honesty that you have when it comes down to you're like, hey, I knew I wasn't there. And then my wife had to take it because it does, it shifts. It's like a seesaw. Sometimes it's more on one side than it is on the other. But the thing is, you are going to balance each other out. And maybe balance isn't the right word. I love to say harmony because there'll be seasons that you give more than the other person does. And it doesn't mean the other person doesn't want to. It just means that they don't have it to give, but you have the overflow, and now your overflow can cover the gap that's filling the gap that's there. And so I want you just to speak, and we're going to close this thing out, but I want you to speak to, because you said something very interesting in that last moment when you were speaking about the woman that is with someone and they haven't developed so fully just yet. How can you encourage her to, because he woke up too. He's gonna wake up, y'all. He will wake up. And maybe he woke up and he just needs that encouragement to know that you're supporting him to go forward. What is the language that sometimes y'all hear stuff a little different than we say it. What do you say to that woman? How should she support him as he's developing and understanding that she's called, she's moving forward, and he's not no competition is there. It's not for competition. We're complementing one another. How do you speak to that space?
Well, when it comes to, and you mean the man encouraging his wife, right? How do I speak to her, or vice versa?
I actually want you to speak to the woman because
Yeah,
sometimes we think we're doing it the right way, and what we're saying is really not what you hear.
yeah,
What when the man is feeling, okay, maybe I'm not carrying the weight that I feel like I should. And I see you moving, I see you doing these things. I want to show up. I don't know how yet.
yeah.
How do you speak as a man? What gave you that push to go forward, um, to show up and to get in your rightful
Yeah.
place?
I think I think part of it is just sometimes just being quiet and observing. You know,
Mm,
I think for me, I had to sit back and just observe and see, all right, what areas is my wife struggling with? What areas that I can help and assist? And I think that for me, the key thing is not to take over. You know, the key thing for me was come in and be that help, be that support mechanism. And sometimes the support mechanism is just having the conversation. All right, this is what you're dealing with. You know, I can't feel good at night that you're up at 2 in the morning working on whatever you're working, and I'm on the other side of the bed snoring. I have to show up, and showing up at different intervals could be, the requirement could be very little or it could be much. And so for me, what I started to do was say, all right, hey, this is what you got going on. Let's put both of our minds together and see how we can make this thing happen. All right, you got this together. Let me give you some input, my vision, or what you need. And we started to work together in developing something, but it's her thing. You know, I'm not here to take over. I'm here to undergird, right? And as the man, that is our job and our responsibility to come in and say, hold on, she is tied to me. There is a connection here that as I start to pour into her, right? And sometimes that pouring could be, it may not even be related to the very thing that she's dealing with,
mhm.
right? It may not, she may be developing her ministry or whatever it is that but that pour doesn't have to come from that place. It could come from, all right, let's go to the track and go take a walk, or listen, let's just have a general you know, it could be like words of encouragement, like, hey, and me and my wife, I'm very blasé about who I am, and you guys will see that, you know, you know, sometimes it's just the little notes in the text, some it's those little things that we as men sometimes will overlook, like, I don't need to do that. But that may be the very thing that helps her, So it could be like, hey baby, you sexy, baby, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, because some of the spaces that my wife is going to occupy,
Mm,
I'm responsible for building her, right?
mm,
I'm for building her. I play a role. So if it's like, hey, you look beautiful, hey, whatever it is that I have to do to build her up so that when she walks into that room, right, and she's standing in front of all those people, she walks in with the confidence. She walks in with knowing that, hold on, I may be in front of 1,000 people, but I know my husband,
mm-hmm.
and he got my back. And so long, and that's the thing with me. Sometimes I fall back and I just make eye contact. And my eye contact is like, listen, you go for it. You don't hold back. You go all the way in and release everything that you need to release. And at the end of the day, after she's done what she done, I go back and I encourage her, you did good. You did good. You did phenomenal. You're great. And
Mm-hmm.
those things are what's necessary in the totality of the relationship.
Yeah.
Whether you're in ministry, whether you're, vice versa, we have to pour into the people, our spouses, our wives daily, you know,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to say this real quick, Miss Ebony, and you know, and I think there will be instances where you don't meet eye to eye. There's going to be times
Mm-hmm.
the conversations are not going to be, peaceful. But I've learned one thing. Sometimes I just don't say anything, right? And I could very well be right
Yeah.
and yield, because I'm understanding that when I yield, it doesn't take anything from me. It doesn't take anything from me. It says that, listen, sometimes you have to be the bigger person. I might be right, but you got it. You got it. You know, and relationships are about knowing when to act and knowing when to fall back and say, listen, you got this. And I hope I answered your question, Miss Ebony. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
we have to know that there'll be times like we talked about it. There'll be times that one person they're there, and then and some people are God is he's developing you, and so
mhm,
the things when you take your hands off of them and you stop trying to lead and guide them, understand that God is doing it, then they will develop some things that they needed maybe they needed to fall a little bit, maybe they needed to be discouraged for a moment so that they can realize that they can find their confidence in God, and maybe they needed to understand certain things, and it's not that you're not supporting them through it, but it's that God is building them as an individual too, and then you guys together can work together and build. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to even hear what it looks like from the male perspective about what growth looks like and how to cultivate that thing in the household, in the marriage, in relationships, because it may not even be in just in a marriage. It may be in relationship. There are things that will be cultivated from the male perspective, and we speak in one thing and they're like, nope, that's not what they heard. Let's help figure that interpretation. What is the
yeah,
interpretation of that? But you
absolutely.
guys, listen, we could talk all night, but we won't.
Yeah.
August 1st and 2nd is She Woke Up. First night is Friday night. We are doing several things that evening, but Saturday is where you will see Pastor Sam come in and talk about some of the things that we discussed today, but you get to sit there, ask questions, you get to dive deeper. If you have some questions about elevation, what that looks like, how not to be intimidated, how to speak up for the things that maybe you feel the Lord has told you to do and your husband is looking at you a little side eye. Like how do you do that? Like how was that interpreted and all of those things? He'll be able to sit there and answer questions. And I just believe that God is going to impart so many things. We have so many sessions, we have lots of speakers, but everybody's coming to pour into you. So if you have not gotten your tickets, head over to shewokeup.com, grab your ticket. It's an investment. It's an investment into you. This whole weekend is about you. It's called She Woke Up. You're going to hold that mirror up and look at yourself and ask God to illuminate all the areas that you've allowed yourself to go to sleep in. So I
Absolutely.
want to thank you for all of your time and your wisdom and your candor and your vulnerability tonight, just sharing. I can't wait to hear more. And again, you all register, come to his session. He is a comedian, y'all, in his own right. I feel like he has me chuckling sometimes. So be ready. Have your notebook out, but come open and ready to hear what God has to say.
Absolutely. You don't want to miss this. It's going to be good. No.
Yes, yes. So we will see you. Do you have one more word for the people, or you?
I just want to say, and I want to really encourage everyone, listen, you don't want to miss this conference. It's going to be phenomenal, and it's about building, it's about getting a greater understanding and knowing how to navigate life when it comes to relationship, and when it comes to your person or your spouse. It's information, and information leads to freedom. Information leads to liberation, and so this is an opportunity for you to get in, ask the questions, and have that dialogue with many of the speakers that's going to be on. Oh my God, you don't want to miss this, because it's all whole. We're taking all the holds off. We're letting everything just roll and flow. And it's going to be a time of transparency, and a time of not only transparency, but a time of revealing and revelation to those of you who are going to be in the number. Don't miss
Yeah,
it.
you got that right. God is going to do something. I said he's flipping on light switches all weekend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So you all again, shewokeup.com, head over, register. I'll put his discount code in the post, so that if you want to register and 30% off of your ticket price with his discount code, you can. But other than that, we will see you August 1st and 2nd. Be in the place. You don't want to miss what God is doing. All
Absolutely.
right.
You
Have a
guys,
good evening.
evening.
All right. Stop recording.